Hello and welcome back again to That Track's F1 podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. It's not too long now until we're going to Miami for the next race of the season. I'm sure we've all kept busy during this break, waiting for F1 to come back. Well, it's nearly here. So I thought I'd pop on today and have a little chat about the FIA's announcement of the new tweaks to the regulations. There's quite a few things to talk about and to look at. They've made quite a few changes. And although I think we'll really need to wait until we see these changes implemented in a race to know how effective they are, I have to say, on paper, it doesn't look too bad. Anyway, before we get all stuck into that, could I please ask you to like and subscribe and to maybe give us a little follow, a like, or a comment on our socials at That Tracks F1 Podcast. I'd really appreciate it, guys. It helps me out more than you know, and it's literally just a button click for you. So I would absolutely love it if you could do that for me. Thank you. Now, getting into the tweaks, or as the FIA call them, refinements of the 2026 FIA Formula One regulations agreed by all stakeholders. That's the official title of the document. So I think taking it section by section, we'll have a little look at what we think this could mean, because on an initial read through, I kind of read it from top to bottom. I got to the bottom and went, what? It was pardon. Some bits I grasped quite quickly on the first read through, but I had to go back through because there is obviously a lot of technical speak. And I mean no disrespect when I say this, but if you are a more casual fan or a newer fan, or perhaps not as into like the technical side of it, it could look very, very complicated. So I'm hoping to help you simplify it a little bit here. And I'm hoping that in simplifying it, that I've actually got it right. I think I have, but we'll see. So what happened was, on the 20th of April, the FIA, FOM, which is Formula One Management, team principals, power unit manufacturers, all got together and they finalised this online meeting. There was consultation with team engineers and technical staff, and apparently a lot of driver feedback was A, given, and B, taken on board, which is something that I'm very, very happy to hear, that they have listened to the drivers, they have listened to the concerns, they have listened to their ideas about ways to make things better, safer, and that they've brought that into the decision making. I think that's really important. So initially, looking at this, it applies to both qualifying and the race. The maximum recharge has been cut from 8 megajoules to 7 megajoules. And this shortens that super clipping window down to between 2 and 4 seconds. And this, I think, is really important for qualifying in particular, because it means that the drivers can drive more flat out. They will be putting in qualifying laps that are more like what we're used to seeing and less of this lift and coast into the corners. The super clip power has also been increased. Where it was 250 kilowatts, it's now 350 kilowatts. And that means that takes less time to charge. So, like I say, it shortens that window. It's much easier for the drivers to manage, because the cognitive load that these drivers are under, all the things they have to juggle and think about is unimaginable. It's so easy to sit there with the untrained eye and think, well, they just sit in a car and drive around. They are literally spinning plates like one of the old circus acts constantly to try and keep on top of everything, flicking paddles, pressing buttons, and this was just another thing that was taking up that valuable cognitive space that they needed to concentrate on other things. So I do think that is definitely a push in the right direction. I think the drivers will be happier with that, and I think we as viewers will be happier with that, because we will see a more traditional qualifying lap. We won't see so much lift and coast into the corners anymore. There's also been a change to the number of races where alternative lower energy limits may apply. This was originally set at 8 races, and it's now going up to 12 races. And this is a flexible regulatory mechanism which allows the FIA to reduce the maximum electric recharge for those specific races. The other thing that has been put forward is capping the boost power. It's now limited to 150 kilowatts, or the car's current power level activation if it's higher than 150 kilowatts. This is something that will really help with those closing speed issues like we saw with Berman and Colapinto. And this closing speed issue will also be helped by the fact that the MGUK will still deploy at 350 kilowatts in the acceleration zones where they can overtake. So we're talking about corner exit to the next braking zone. But everywhere else on the lap, the MG UK will be limited to 250 kilowatts. And that, again, is to bring down the difference in closing speeds that we saw that led to Behrman's accident and which could lead to more accidents in the future. There's been some changes as well to wet weather driving conditions. Now, I know we've not seen a wet race yet, but I think we were all a little bit dreading a wet race when we could see what could happen in the dry. That was concerning enough without throwing in wet weather. So apparently this was one of the areas that had the strongest driver feedback. This was something the drivers really, really pushed for, understandably. And that was for the tyre blanket temperatures. You know, the tyre blankets that are put on the tyres to warm them up before they're put on the car to go out. That for these temperatures, for the intermediate tyres to go up. So when the intermediates are put on the car, they're warmer than they used to be. And this will improve the grip and avoid a lot of these cold tyre accidents that you see. And obviously, I think this has been a thing that has become even more of an issue this year because, as we can see, now we're not in the ground force era anymore. These current cars are lower grip and a lot more lively. So I think that is a very good suggestion. And I'm pleased to see that the FIA have listened to the drivers there and are looking to bring that in. Also, with the wet weather racing, the maximum ERS deployment has been reduced. And this, again, is to improve control in the low grip conditions. And it'll also help prevent those torque spikes that we've seen. One of the other points that I saw about the wet weather racing was it was a little bit vague for me, this one. I would like to know, I'd like to see it. I'd like to know what it is, just because I'm nosy. But according to the FIA, they are bringing in, and I quote, an improved rear light system for heavy spray driving. What that quite entails, I don't know. I suppose we'll probably have to wait for a wet race to see, unless we get some more details about it in the meantime. But I do think that's definitely a step in the right direction as well, because some of the wet racing conditions we've seen, especially when you get it from an onboard perspective, are absolutely terrifying. So I am pleased to see that that is something they're bringing in, but how exactly that works yet, we're not sure. So all of these tweaks and refinements are subject to a vote for them to be implemented, for them to be brought in. I can't see, if they've thrashed it out this far, that will be any issue. And they're all going to be voted on quite quickly so that they can be implemented for the Miami Grand Prix, which I think is a really great idea. The other thing that they're looking at bringing in, and this is the only part of these improvements, refinements, tweaks, that is going to be tested first before it's brought in, and that's the refinements to the start procedure. As we saw in Australia with Colapinto coming off the grid at the start of the race, he had that very, very near miss. And that's because the torque delivery has been very difficult to manage in these cars. So now there will be a low power start detection system. And this is something that will trigger when a car doesn't accelerate as expected off the start line once the clutch is released. And this low power start detection system will then instantly respond and deploy the MG UK to boost the acceleration of the car to a minimum level. And yes, it's another argument that it's another thing taken away from the control of the driver. And I get that. I see that argument. But we cannot have a repeat. We can't keep having repeats of what very nearly happened to Franco. That was a very scary moment. And his reactions were absolutely incredible, as I've said before. But we don't want to keep seeing that. Also, alongside this, the cars will now have flashing lights laterally and to the rear to warn other drivers that they are potentially slower away. It all helps. It's a good idea, and I can see that working in the majority of cases. You could argue that the flashing light system would not really have helped Franco in his circumstances because his visibility was blocked by a car in between him and the stalled car. So I think you could have lit it up like a Christmas tree and had a big neon arrow from the heavens pointing at it, and the chances are that Franco would still have been in the same situation. But I can see this light system helping out in other situations that are not quite the same as Franco's, where you are probably directly behind a car, or say you're further towards the back of the grid and it's a car at the front that's stalled and the traffic in between has moved away. So I do think, again, it is a step in the right direction. I just don't think it would have helped Franco when what happened. The other refinement to the start the FIA is looking at making is that they will reset the energy counter at the beginning of the formation lap, so that all the cars, when they grid up, will start the race with the same energy state across all of them. They will all be starting with an equal energy state. And this, again, is to try and prevent any accidents and near misses coming off the line. So I hope that's helped a little bit. I've kind of tried to hit a middle ground whereby I'm not oversimplifying it to the point that makes you feel a bit patronised, but I'm also not trying to get into the nitty-gritty of the finer details either. I think for the fans, whether you be a new fan or a more established fan, the regulations this year have been very difficult to follow. As I think it was one of the drivers that said that even they're struggling to understand some of it. I think it was Lewis Hamilton that said that. So yeah, don't feel disheartened or put off when you see all this tech talk, because you don't really need to know the tiny, finer points. We don't need an engineering degree to understand it, really. We've just got to look at how it affects the racing as a whole. And again, all of these things that they've proposed all look great on paper, but really only time will tell. And I think that Miami will demonstrate whether or not a lot of these tweaks are viable, whether they are a good idea. They certainly look like a good idea on paper. And I don't envy the FIA the job they've got of trying to appease the drivers, whose safety is the most important thing, trying to appease the fans because we don't want to lose fans from the sport. We've been there before where fans drifted away, and we want to keep the interest level in F1 right up there. We want our sport to do well. We want our sport to survive. And realistically, they're very limited in what they can change. These literally are refinements and not changes. And I think that was quite a careful selection of the word refinements rather than changes to, because realistically, they cannot change the regulations now, because all of the cars, all the power units have all been built to these regulations. So all they can really do now is take what they've got and refine it till it works, or works the best way that it can until it's a regulation change. And I think everybody's been very vocal about the things they don't like about this regulation set. And I think Max Verstappen in particular has been very vocal about the fact that he doesn't like this regulation set. And as I've said previously, I kind of don't blame him for being vocal about it, because he did say back in 2023 that he didn't think this was going to work. And he's been proved semi-right. The points he raised have been valid points. But I think now Max and us as fans, we really have to just kind of shut up and get on with it. And I mean no disrespect to Max when I say that, but this is what you've got. This is what you've got to work with. And I know there's lots of argument amongst fans and in the press about, would Max be complaining if he was winning? Yes, he would. No, he wouldn't. We don't know. I don't think it helps that he's not winning, because the Mercedes boys seem to be quite happy with these regulations up to a point. But yeah, I think that's really what we've got to do now, is we've kind of got to see what will happen with these new refinements, see if it improves things. There's no reason why, if it doesn't work, or it would work better if it was tweaked again, that they can't go back and tweak it again. And this is going to be the secret to it now, is that they've just got to keep refining it and tweaking it until it works, until it works the best that it can work within the regulation set. So I think as fans, we need to get behind that mentality a little bit and start concentrating on the positives. And there are things about these regulation sets to enjoy. So hopefully these new refinements will improve things enough at Miami and going forward that the drivers are happier and the fans are happier, because that's what we want, isn't it? We all want to enjoy our sport. And talking of enjoying our sport, just to add to our enjoyment in Miami, this is the race where we traditionally see the first lot of upgrades. Now, this could be quite challenging for the teams, because Miami is a sprint weekend, which means that there is only one practice session. So any major changes that they're making to the car, yes, they will have tested them, but this is the first time they're bringing these upgrades to a race weekend, and to only have the one practice session could make things quite interesting. This is certainly the case for Racing Bulls. Alan Permain said that they had originally planned to bring their first upgrade to Bahrain and then their next upgrade to Miami. And apparently these two upgrades can't be brought in together. So they're having to bring one upgrade or update to Miami, and then at the very next race in Montreal, the next update, which is a bit of a unique situation. McLaren are also apparently bringing a batch of upgrades. It'll be a series of aerodynamic improvements that they were bringing in over the Miami weekend and the Montreal weekend. But again, like everybody else, up against it, because both race weekends, one practice session. Ferrari. Oh, Ferrari. Touched on this before. Love Ferrari. You can't not love Ferrari. But why do they do this? I'm really hoping I'm wrong, but I've been around long enough to know that Ferrari have this habit, and I've mentioned it before, of it's not broken, but they try and fix it. And I know that we have to update and upgrade. They can't stay where they are, and they'll have to bring improvements. But that car is working reasonably well. It's pretty much up there. They are taking the fight to Mercedes. So what they're going to do in Miami is bring the car back. Well, they're going to bring half the car back because apparently 50% of the car will be completely different to the car we've seen so far. It's got a revised floor to increase the downforce, which is a good thing if they're taking that challenge to the Mercedes. And apparently a completely and utterly, totally new front wing. Now, they know what they're doing. I'd like to think they know what they're doing. I'm just going on previous form, so I'm just a little bit worried for Ferrari, and I'm really quite worried for the Ferrari fans amongst you, because this could be the point where your head drops and you're back to where you were last year. And I really don't want to see that. I really, really hope. I have got faith in Fred Vasseur. I think he's absolutely brilliant. And I think that Fred gets a rough deal. He gets a rough deal in the Italian press. And I feel very much that Fred's got a vision. Fred knows what he's doing. He's been employed to do a job. And Ferrari need to stop interfering. The upper echelons at Ferrari need to leave Fred alone and let Fred do what Fred does. So I'm really, really hoping that this will be a case of Fred being allowed to do what Fred does and it working out great. So we'll have to wait and see. The other thing that's going to affect development and upgrades going forward, you may have heard people talk about this. There's some different opinions about how the acronym is pronounced. It's ADUO. It's ADUO, and it stands for Additional Development and Upgrade Opportunities. And the idea of this is that the FIA will measure the average performance of each power unit every sort of 5 to 6 races. And when they look at these averages, the teams with a weaker power unit are going to be given more development opportunities than those teams that are at the top and doing well. I mean, this will be quite good for Ferrari because it will help them close that gap to the Mercedes, and potentially they might have to be closing the gap to McLaren going forward. But the downside is that the teams with the slower PUs like Honda, Racing Balls, Audi will actually close up on Ferrari. At the moment, it's unknown whether the ADUO will go ahead in Miami. The FIA did schedule it for Miami because Miami would have been the 6th race of the season. But of course, we lost the 2 Middle East races. So there's no word yet on whether this will be done at the Miami weekend or not. But that's another thing to keep an eye on and another little thing thrown in the pot to mix things up a bit. So we'll see how that pans out. So anyway, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will be back a week on Thursday with my preview of the Miami Grand Prix. I'll do some predictions, which will be difficult because, as we know, the teams have all been working very hard and making changes, so it's all a little bit up in the air again as to who's going to be where, but I'll give it my best shot. So I'll look forward to speaking to you all then. In the meantime, look after yourselves, take care, and don't forget the cheesy tagline, That Tracks F1 Podcast. Track the action, join the fun.